I've just seen like a lot of stuff about like the National Tutoring Project, and I was wondering broadly what the deal is with that before I embark on my own research.
So do you want to just go from the very basic stuff, like what the National Tuition Project is?
Yeah, sure. And
All
how
right.
does it, how will it affect us or
How
me?
will it affect Mannings and you guys? So the National Tuition Program is, depending on how you slice it, I think about £350 million of funding, which is being provided from the government to schools. To schools and sort of little asterisk there, to schools and tuition agencies, in order to support students who have been negatively affected by the lockdown and missing education in school. That was typically, a study showed that it disproportionately affected disadvantaged students, and therefore a lot of that funding is going towards supporting disadvantaged students, which is kind of what we already did anyway. The funding for that used to come from something called Pupil Premium, which is the same as sort of free school meals type stuff, same category. But now it's going to come from NTP as well. There is some funding which is being given just to schools to spend on those students any way that they like, pretty much, and that's quite a large sum. And then there's some money that's being sent to tuition agencies, with the caveat that it has to be earmarked for providing tuition to these students. Okay. The way it works basically is Mannings have like a set number of hours which we're sort of receiving funding for. We've actually just this morning received a confirmation that there's 15,000 hours of tuition that have been allocated to Mannings, which sounds like a lot. It's about 1.2 times as much as we did not last year, but the one before, or what we were projecting to have done last year before coronavirus hit. So it's quite good. There's a lot of hours there. And basically schools come to us and say, hey, we'd like to get some tuition through NTP. And we say, okay, how many hours do you want? And we have like a certain number of hours. And when we've run out of hours, then we can no longer provide NTP. Basically is how it works. They do have to pay a little bit for it. They pay like 25%, but the remaining 75% comes out of our sort of block of funding, which we're receiving.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
We're going to receive it on a monthly basis, I think. So what that means is that a lot of schools that have not had tuition before are now going to be looking for tuition. There's one of the main reasons why they wouldn't have one of the main reasons why they wouldn't have gotten tuition before is because it's quite expensive for schools. I mean, I don't think it's that expensive. I still think it's worthwhile. A lot of schools don't think it's too expensive, but some of them do. But hopefully with a 75% discount, they are going to decide that actually it's pretty cheap now and probably worthwhile, which I guarantee that it is. And so all of those schools who've previously not been getting tuition because it was too expensive are now going to be looking for it. Similarly, all the schools that we've been working with already, and in London, that's a huge amount. We have something like a 20% market share in London in terms of the schools, are going to be spending hopefully all of their funding on Mannings. That's what I've heard, at least. Harris Academy South Norwood was a big client last year and the year before, and they have a £50,000 grant for specifically tuition from something called the Headley Foundation. And they also have NTP as well on top of that. Okay. And they're getting 75% discount on all of it. So it's it's madness. So they're going to be going crazy with tuition. They've already got, they want like 20, no, they want 10. How many do they want? Sorry, 12 tutors for 2 hours a week. So they're already getting 24 hours a week. and that was before NTP even kicks in. So I don't know what they're going to do once NTP arrives in November. And a lot of schools that we've worked with for a long time who have previously only had small schemes, schools like Camden School for Girls, you may have seen me broadcast for a job there recently. We just work with a couple of their students with special educational needs, like an hour a week sort of thing. But they've just put in a request for 16 tutors for 3 hours a week each. So
Oh, cool. Okay.
like 48 hours a week at Camden School for Girls. So, you know, the amount of tuition which is going to be available is just way massively increased. In terms of where we're at in sort of processing those requests, some schools have been really on the ball, and they've said in September, look, I want to get everything set up now. I want to book you in. I want to know we're going to get all of our pupil list sorted and all the data for you, and then we can just start on the 2nd of November straight into it, basically, because we want to get spending that funding as soon as possible. I'm sure most schools would have preferred to start tuition in September when their students arrived back from, you know, 5-6 months of no school. But the funding wasn't something the government wasn't ready, so it took way too long.
So is that what the holdup is with like getting hours? I know it's just not like unique to Manning's. I work for another education agency, but it's just everybody's like, just wait until October half term. I'm like, but what's happening after that?
Yes.
You've had me since like October, like since the first week of September.
So our funding, the NTP funding that comes to Manning's will be arriving on the 1st of November, Sunday the 1st of November, hopefully. And the funding that the schools receive, that they're allowed to spend on anything, including tuition, and we're hoping that they will, is also arriving on the 1st of November.
Cool.
So basically the schools will be, all schools virtually, apart from those with other kinds of tuition funding available, will be looking for tuition to start from Monday, the week commencing Monday, the 2nd of November. Some of them have been a little bit slow and they're starting on the 9th of November instead. But yes, that includes a lot of schools that we have in the works already. Camden School for Girls was the first one that I broadcast, but there are a lot that are in the pipeline. I don't know exactly how many. I've got a spreadsheet with at least sort of 30 rows, each of, you know, which have different requests from schools. So it's difficult to say how many hours we're really looking at. Jonnie estimates about 800 hours a week are incoming.
Okay, cool.
Post the beginning of November. I mean, that's kind of relying on schools not dilly-dallying and getting their act together and you know, following through with their request and not suddenly deciding to go with a different tuition agency or something else terrible happening. But yeah, it's basically put us, and I'm sure this is the case with your other education company as well, it's put us in a very difficult situation in that we are aware of this huge influx of hours that are going to need filling, which is going to require a whole lot of new tutors, including yourself. You're one of those new tutors. Whilst also being painfully aware that, as is often the case in September and the beginning of October, there are a lot of people looking for work and not that much work available.
Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah, like I said, it's pretty much always the case this time of year. When schools get back in September, first thing we do is contact the teachers and say, hey, would you like any tuition this year? And the vast majority of the time, they are sort of like, and they are, and they're, you know, the first couple of weeks are just them finding their bearings, getting all the kids sorted. They're so busy. And then sort of at the beginning of October, they're like, oh yeah, let's get some tuition. I'll just put in a funding request. And so that takes a matter of weeks. And then they sort of get to us just before October half term. They say, hey, can we start a scheme after October half term?
Okay.
So very often October half term does mark that boundary between this kind of period of anxiety at the start of the year where we're worried that we're not going to have enough work for our tutors. And normally what happens in the second half of the autumn term is we get busier and busier. We start to realize that we actually don't have enough tutors, and we start our hiring process at this point. So this year, because of NTP, we took a head start and we started hiring much sooner. It obviously means that there's lots of people coming on board now into an environment where there's not that many hours available. And of course, we're funneling as many of those hours towards the tutors that were with Manning's last year, because we have an existing relationship with them, and we have a responsibility to them. But yes, the idea is that once some of these schools get their funding finalized and their acts together, that everyone who's getting a job with Manning's and everyone who has been with Manning's previously and is continuing to work with us will have enough work to satisfy their needs. That's the plan.